Hey guys, tonight we're sailing back to 1375 BCE to the island of Crete, where the warm Aegean winds carry the scent of olive oil, salt and crushed flowers. The sun glows red over the palace of Knossos, the greatest wonder of the Bronze Age world. From the sea, you can see its terraces rising in tiers of cream and red stone, painted with dolphins, lilies and bulls. At its heart lies a maze of corridors so complex that later ages will call it the Labyrinth. You step onto the sun-baked road leading up from the harbour. The path is alive with traders and scribes, women in flowing skirts and boys carrying jars of wine. There are no city walls here. Knossos does not need them. The Cretans rule the sea, and their ships guard them better than any stone could. The palace itself seems eternal, 4 stories of colonnades, frescoed halls, and light wells that catch the morning sun. Inside, the air is cool and sweet. Perfume drifts from open jars in storerooms lined with hundreds of pithoi, vast clay vessels holding olive oil, honey, and grain. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth of rooms, a priestess walks slowly toward an altar, a snake coiled around her wrist. She moves with that serene confidence only civilizations at their peak possess. The calm before the fault line cracks. The Minoans, as later scholars will name them, are masters of harmony. They worship the rhythms of nature, bull and goddess, earth and sea, life and renewal. They dance in open courtyards to the sound of drums, leap over bulls in rituals half religious, half sport, and decorate every wall with flowing lines of blue and red, celebrating motion, fertility and joy. No army parades here, no monuments to conquest stand in the sun. Their empire is one of trade, not war. In the throne room, a red-plastered chamber glowing in the torchlight, a seat of gypsum gleams beneath a fresco of griffins. The king of Knossos sits there, though his power feels priestly more than political. He speaks through rituals and symbols, not decrees. When the horn of a bull echoes through the halls, the court bows in reverence. To them the animal is sacred, the beating heart of their religion, the emblem of Crete's vitality. Outside you can hear the hum of the workshops, artisans carving ivory, hammering bronze, painting vases. The harbour below glitters with ships carrying amphorae to Egypt, Cyprus and the Levant. Crete is the crossroads of the ancient world, a link between East and West, between myth and history. Its people have everything: abundance, beauty, peace. And maybe that is the danger, because beneath the painted calm the island trembles, literally. The Aegean sits on the restless spine of the earth, and the gods of the sea and sky are never fully tamed. On some nights, fishermen swear the sea glows red, others tell of tremors underfoot too subtle to notice by day. But tonight, the people of Knossos sleep easily. Their lamps burn in the palace windows, their storerooms are full, their ships are safe. The queen's gardens overflow with lilies, and the scent of incense drifts toward the stars. If you could walk through those halls, you might believe this world would last forever, a paradise untouched by war, a city ruled by dance and light. You'd hear laughter in the courtyards, music echoing through painted corridors, the splash of fountains in the courtyards. Yet in the stillness beyond the hills, the sea murmurs a warning. Something vast and ancient stirs beneath its surface. The gods are not as gentle as the frescoes make them seem, and before long the island of peace will tremble, burn, and vanish into legend. But for now, in the golden hour before the storm, Knossos shines, perfect, proud, and unaware that it stands on the edge of the abyss. The sun rises over Crete like liquid gold, spilling across the whitewashed terraces of Knossos. The sea below shimmers in the distance, dotted with Minoan ships whose prows gleam like the horns of bulls. This is not just a palace, it's a living organism, pulsing with trade, ritual and rhythm. At its height, around 1600 BCE, Knossos commands every island and inlet of the Aegean, its influence stretching all the way to Egypt's delta and the shores of Anatolia. You descend into the bustle of the city that sprawls around the palace like coral. The streets are paved with smooth stones. Women in tiered skirts sell saffron and fish at open stalls, their arms glinting with bronze bracelets. Men carry baskets of figs and grain toward the palace gates. The smell of olive oil and roasted barley fills the air. Everywhere you look, life flows in easy motion. No armies, no fortifications, just a deep trust in the sea and its gods. The Minoans call themselves the children of the sea. Their ruler, the Wonax, or perhaps the priest-king, governs not by force but through ritual authority. Religion and government are the same here. Every act from trade to harvest is sacred. The great goddess, often shown holding snakes or standing between lions, is the heart of this faith. She represents the cycles of life, growth, decay, and renewal, the living pulse of the island itself. In her honour, the Minoans celebrate festivals that seem to merge theatre, sport, and worship. Bulls are brought into open courtyards where acrobats, young men and women, run forward, grab the animals by their horns, and vault over their backs. The crowd cheers, drums pound, and the priests scatter petals. To modern eyes, it looks like madness. To them, it's communion, the perfect symbol of courage, balance, and trust in divine power. The palace mirrors that same order, a labyrinth of harmony. Its design seems chaotic at first, but every passage and courtyard aligns with the sun. The walls are painted in fluid lines, with dolphins swimming through waves, griffins prowling behind thrones, and maidens carrying jars of saffron to the goddess. The art breathes motion. There's no obsession with conquest, no portraits of kings crushing enemies. The Minoans depict what they love: nature, beauty, and grace. Even the plumbing here feels like magic. Pipes of clay carry running water through the palace. Drains flush waste away. There are light wells that open the ceilings to the sky, flooding chambers with brightness. Some rooms even have bathtubs carved from single blocks of stone. This is Bronze Age engineering at its most elegant, a civilization that values comfort, not control. You pause by a fresco showing a procession of women with long dark curls and bright skirts, each holding offerings of grain and honey. Their faces are serene, their eyes half closed, as though they've made peace with the divine. It's hard to imagine these people making war. The Minoans prefer trade to conquest, persuasion to plunder. Their ships bring back gold from Egypt, copper from Cyprus, and tin from distant lands. In return, they export olive oil, wine, and the finest pottery in the world, painted with spirals that seem to dance, and they do all this without swords drawn. Their strength is the sea, not as a barrier, but as a bridge. Theirs is what later poets will call a thalassocracy, a rule of the waves. The Minoans' navy doesn't conquer coasts, it keeps them connected. The Mediterranean for them is not a battlefield but a marketplace, yet even paradise has its shadows. You can sense them, faint but growing. The trade routes that sustain Knossos stretch thin across dangerous waters. Pirates raid small islands. Foreign merchants bring not only goods, but whispers, tales of rising powers on the mainland, of warriors forging bronze weapons thicker than a man's arm. The Minoans smile and pour them wine, pretending not to worry. In truth, they've grown used to peace. The palace has no fortress walls. The soldiers are few. Why fear war when the sea is yours? You look out over the courtyards, the painted corridors, the laughter of dancers rehearsing for another festival. It all feels timeless, but that's the illusion of every golden age. Knossos shines brightest just before the fire, and somewhere, far beyond the horizon, the first shadows of the Mycenaeans, the warriors of mainland Greece, are already stirring. You enter the heart of the palace, where sunlight flickers through narrow shafts and the air smells faintly of incense and beeswax. The hum of Knossos fades behind you. Here, deep within the labyrinth, the sounds are slower, softer. Sandals brushing on stone, the distant trickle of a hidden fountain. This is the world of queens and priestesses, where every corridor whispers of secrets, every fresco holds a prayer. The queen's chambers are unlike anything else in the ancient world. The walls are painted with scenes of dolphins leaping through waves, their bodies curved in graceful rhythm. The colours, deep blue, coral red, gold, shimmer in the lamplight as if the sea itself were breathing on the plaster. Nearby, another fresco shows women picking saffron flowers, their long hair tied with ribbons, their eyes large and calm. These are not servants, they are holy attendants. embodiments of a society where women hold sacred power. The queen herself, or perhaps the high priestess, lives surrounded by luxury and mystery. Her chamber is connected to a private bathroom, complete with a clay bathtub and flowing water, a marvel of ancient engineering. In the adjoining sanctuary she tends to the snake goddess, whose bronze and ivory effigies glint in the half-light. The goddess stands upright, bare-breasted, with serpents coiling around her arms, a symbol of renewal, wisdom, and Earth's unending cycles. The air feels heavy, charged, as you imagine the rituals that once filled this place. The priestesses anoint the goddess with oil, offer honey and flowers, chant in a language no one has spoken for 3,000 years. The snakes move in baskets at their feet, hissing softly as if in answer. Firelight dances on the walls, making the painted dolphins seem to swim and the griffins to blink. Beyond these rooms lies the throne room, the ceremonial heart of Knossos. Its red walls glow with ochre pigment, its gypsum throne smooth and luminous. The seat is small, too small for a warrior king. Whoever sat here ruled by persuasion, not by power. Behind the throne, painted griffins crouch, guardians of divinity, symbols of balance between earth and sky. You step closer, running your fingers along the cool stone. The floor beneath your feet is worn by generations of sandals, hundreds of years of processions, offerings, and prayers. The smell of oil and incense still lingers faintly in the air, absorbed into the walls themselves. The architecture of Knossos is an extension of this spiritual rhythm. Rooms twist and fold back on themselves, corridors double and disappear, stairs lead up and down without warning. To modern eyes it looks like chaos, but it is deliberate, a living maze, mirroring the cycles of the world, where every path returns to its beginning. This is the Labyrinth, not just a mythic prison for a monster, but the architecture of Minoan faith. Order hidden within complexity, divinity within confusion. Light wells open above certain courtyards, pouring sunlight like liquid gold into the deepest chambers. The columns, painted red and black, taper downward instead of upward, a reversal of nature that seems to defy gravity. Everywhere you look, the palace balances opposites, shadow and sun, fire and water, male and female, life and death. The workshops surrounding the palace produce art that mirrors that same philosophy. Jewelers carve gold into double axes, the labrys, symbol of the goddess. Potters decorate amphorae with swirling spirals, representing waves and eternity. The artisans here don't work for war or politics, they create beauty as devotion. To them, art is prayer. Outside, the air hums with activity. Scribes scratching notes onto clay tablets, servants moving jars of oil, singers rehearsing for the next festival. The people of Knossos live in rhythm with their gods. Every harvest, every voyage, every bull-leaping ceremony is a reaffirmation that the island and its goddess are one. And yet, even here, in this perfection of harmony and design, there are cracks in the paint. Some frescoes have been hastily repaired, some storerooms show signs of earthquake damage. The Queen's gardens grow wild in places, as though maintenance has slipped. In the archives, a scribe pauses over his tablet and frowns. The shipments from Thera haven't arrived, the trade routes seem uncertain. For centuries, Knossos has lived without fear, untouched by invasion or rebellion. But now, deep in its labyrinth, the air feels a little tighter, like the calm before thunder. You look back once more at the fresco of dolphins, creatures forever leaping in a sea that no longer exists, and realize that beauty alone cannot hold back time. The walls of Knossos have seen centuries of peace, but soon they will see fire. Morning breaks over the harbour of Amnisos, the port of Knossos, and the sea blazes like polished bronze. You can smell tar, salt, and the faint tang of wine leaking from amphorae. Dozens of ships rock gently against the quays, sleek double-prowed vessels painted with red spirals and bull horns. Minoan sailors move across the decks with the calm precision of men who know the sea better than land. This is the lifeblood of the Minoan world, the fleet of Knossos, the arteries through which its power and prosperity flow. You walk the harbour's edge and watch as merchants and crews load goods for distant lands. Olive oil in clay jars, rolls of fine wool, carved ivory, and small figurines of the snake goddess are bound for ports stretching from Egypt to Syria. The Minoans' ships cross every sea between Crete and the Nile Delta, bringing back copper, gold, spices, and exotic animals. They are not conquerors, they are connectors. Theirs is an empire built on exchange. The sea, which to others is a barrier, is their highway. Minoan captains know every island, every current, every hidden cove. They move like spirits of the Aegean, guided by the stars and the habits of the wind. A scribe sits in the shade recording the tallies. 20 amphorae of oil, 12 jars of honey, 1 crate of saffron. The script he uses, Linear A, remains a mystery even today, unreadable, its graceful symbols preserving the voices of a civilization whose secrets died in the fire. But to the scribe, it's routine. His reed stylus presses into damp clay as easily as breath, sealing the wealth of the sea into lines that will harden in the sun. The sailors chant as they hoist the sails, and you can almost taste the rhythm of their world. Trade instead of war, navigation instead of conquest, diplomacy instead of domination. Their ships are their shields and every port a friend. As the vessels depart, you follow one in your mind's eye, a longship bound northward to the Cyclades. It sails past tiny islands dotted with whitewashed houses, where fishermen wave as it passes. The ship's hull cuts through the blue water like a blade. Its hold is full of olive oil, the liquid gold that fuels the Minoan economy and lights the temples of foreign gods. By nightfall, it will anchor near a settlement on Knossos or Thera, where merchants will trade oil for copper and tin, the metals that make bronze. This is what sustains the island's brilliance: balance. The Minoans have mastered not only the sea, but the art of peace. They are masters of influence, not empire. Egyptian nobles wear Cretan jewellery. Syrian palaces display frescoes painted by Minoan artists. On Cyprus, local potters copy Minoan designs, filling their amphorae with spirals that seem to move like waves. Crete's culture spreads not by conquest, but by imitation. Everyone wants a piece of its beauty. Back in Knossos, the palace hums in response to this flow of trade. Ships bring goods, and goods feed art, and art feeds faith. Every item that enters the storerooms is blessed by priests, recorded by scribes, and eventually distributed to the workshops. The economy isn't just commerce, it's devotion, a vast ritual that turns labour into offering. At midday, a group of foreign envoys arrives. Tall men with shaven heads and linen kilts, clearly Egyptian. They carry gifts, papyrus scrolls, gold jewellery, a carved box filled with perfume. They are received in the grand staircase where light wells pour sunlight over the red columns and polished floors. The air smells of roses and cedar. The meeting is silent and ceremonial, a performance of grace and mutual respect. There are no guards, no threats, no chains. The Minoans' greatest defence is the strength of their civility. And yet, the island's peace is not as effortless as it seems. Beneath the calm lies dependence, a web of trade routes that could unravel with one broken link. Crete's wealth flows from its connections, and the sea, so generous in peace, can turn merciless in anger. The people know this. They tell stories of Poseidon, the Earthshaker, who grants power to sailors but destroys those who grow proud. Every offering, every bull sacrificed, every song sung in the courtyards of Knossos carries the same silent plea. Keep the sea calm, keep the trade alive. But far to the north, beyond the horizon, another island glows under a different kind of fire. Thera, now known as Santorini. In its volcanic heart, something ancient is stirring. Fishermen in the Cyclades speak of rumbling in the deep, of strange tides and dying fish. A faint haze appears on the horizon, and sometimes at dusk the sunset turns the clouds the colour of blood. The priests of Knossos see it too, and they double their offerings. But the gods of fire and sea are not easily appeased. The next time the Minoan ships sail north, they will not return. And soon, Crete, mistress of the waves, queen of the Aegean, will face the greatest catastrophe the ancient world has ever known. At the height of its glory, Knossos lives in a dream of eternal summer. The island is draped in green vineyards and olive groves, its harbours bustling, its warehouses overflowing. The Minoans call themselves the favoured of the gods, a people chosen for harmony, spared the endless wars of the mainland. They believe that their peace is proof of divine blessing, and that their Queen of Heaven, the great goddess, guards them as a mother guards her children. They have no walls, no garrisons, no fortresses. The entire island is an open city, trusting the waves and their ships to keep them safe. To outsiders it's astonishing, a Bronze Age civilization without soldiers, a culture whose only weapons are ritual and rhythm. Even their myths reflect this faith in balance. The bull, symbol of fertility and power, the labyrinth, symbol of order within chaos, the labyrinth, the double axe that stands for creation, not destruction. You walk through the courtyards of Knossos at midday. The marble stones shimmer in the sunlight, the air heavy with jasmine and incense. Drums echo from the central court where dancers prepare for the bull games. The people cheer, the horns sound, and the acrobats, men and women alike, leap over the charging bulls with effortless grace. It looks like madness to anyone else, but here it's devotion, the act of facing chaos, conquering it not with violence but with poise. Every year festivals fill the palace. The Minoans mark the rhythms of nature, the harvest, the solstice, the first rains, with feasts, music and offerings. Saffron, honey and olive oil are poured over stone altars. Women carry baskets of flowers to the shrines. The smell of burning myrrh curls through the air. It's a religion of beauty, where worship means celebrating life, not fearing death. In the palace workshops, artisans carve ivory seals and paint vases with spirals that seem alive. Scribes in the archives press symbols into wet clay, cataloguing the wealth that flows through the island. Wine, wool, copper, perfumes. Children learn to read by copying those same signs. Knowledge, too, is a sacred act, and always at the centre of it all the sea. To the Minoans, the Aegean isn't a threat. It's a living god. They call it our mother and our road. From their ships they see the world, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Byblos, the cedar forests of Lebanon. They trade peacefully, leaving gifts and art wherever they go. Egyptian nobles display Minoan vases in their tombs. Syrian kings import Cretan jewellery. Even the pharaohs of the New Kingdom respect the power of Crete's navy, calling them the Keftiu, the Sea Kings. It's a miracle of peace. And yet, peace can be its own danger. Without war, the Minoans grow complacent. Without enemies, they forget vigilance. They are surrounded by wealth, lulled by success. The scribes record larger harvests. The priests demand richer offerings. The elite build higher terraces. When small earthquakes rattle the island, as they often do, no one worries. The goddess protects us, they say. The sea provides. But something changes in their art. Around 1500 BCE, the frescoes start to darken. The scenes of dolphins and dancers give way to processions of priests carrying bulls' heads and altars splashed with blood. The faces of the gods grow more severe. The smiles fade. It's subtle, but you can feel it. A civilization beginning to sense its own fragility. Perhaps it's the tremors beneath their feet, growing stronger each year. Perhaps it's the strange red haze in the northern sky, where the island of Thera, Santorini, begins to grumble. Farmers speak of dead fish washing ashore, of ash drifting across the sea like grey snow. The air smells faintly of sulphur. The priests perform more sacrifices. The dancers leap higher. The festivals grow louder, more desperate, as if joy itself can silence the coming storm. But peace has momentum, and the Minoans keep moving as they always have. Ships still sail, markets still flourish. The goddess is still praised. The drums still echo through the palace courtyards. Only at night does the queen sit awake in her chamber, listening to the rumble deep beneath the earth. The oil lamps flicker. The snakes in their baskets twitch. Somewhere in the distance the sea growls softly against the rocks. The Minoans built their world on faith. Faith in beauty, faith in the sea, faith that order will hold. But faith can't hold forever. The earth is shifting beneath them, and soon the goddess they worship will move, not as protector but as destroyer. Far to the north of Crete, across the restless blue of the Aegean, another power is rising, one the Minoans scarcely notice until it's too late. On the Greek mainland, in the rocky lands of the Argolid, the Mycenaeans are forging a new kind of world, a world of fortresses, weapons, and kings who dream not of harmony, but of dominion. You stand now on the citadel of Mycenae, where the smell of metal and sweat hangs in the air. The clang of hammer on bronze rings out from the forges. Men test the edges of swords. Horses stamp and snort in their stables. Unlike the Minoans, these people build walls, thick, grim, and heavy, stones stacked so vast that later Greeks will swear giants must have built them. The Mycenaeans have looked south for generations to Crete, and they see something both wondrous and enviable. The island is rich beyond imagining. Its ships rule the seas, its palaces overflow with goods, its people wear gold as casually as linen. The Mycenaean kings, warriors all, admire the Minoans' art, but they crave their power. To them, the peace of Knossos looks like weakness, for now they trade. Crete sends painted pottery and olive oil north. The mainland sends raw metal and slaves south. But trade is never equal between wolf and lamb. The Mycenaeans study Minoan ways, their ships, their writing, their religion, and quietly begin to imitate them. Soon, Minoan symbols appear in mainland shrines. Their linear A script is adapted into linear B, used now for a harsher, more martial tongue. Bit by bit, imitation becomes ambition, and the Minoans, content in their thalassocracy, barely notice. Their scribes record the arrivals of foreign traders with polite indifference. Their priests bless the Mycenaean envoys as guests, not rivals. The Cretan fleets still sail, but fewer ships return. Storms, they think, or pirates, nothing more. Yet the signs are there, subtle as a hairline crack in marble. Mycenaean pottery begins to dominate the markets. Mainland traders grow bolder, establishing small settlements along the northern coast of Crete. Foreign weapons appear in local graves, and every year the visitors from across the sea grow more numerous and less deferential. Meanwhile, the earth itself trembles. The island lies on the fault line of the Aegean, where the African plate presses against the Eurasian. Earthquakes are part of life here, small, frequent, almost familiar. But lately the tremors are stronger. The walls of Knossos shudder, the pillars creak. A temple collapses in the western quarter, a fire breaks out in the storerooms. Repairs begin at once. Minoan builders are masters of resilience, but some of the frescoes are lost forever. And still, the priests say nothing is wrong. The goddess shakes the earth, they insist. It is her heartbeat. It means she lives. But outside the palace, the people begin to whisper. They've heard of the Mycenaeans and their iron weapons. They've seen the mainlanders' ships prowling near the Cyclades. They know that foreign tongues are being spoken in their ports. The old confidence that seaborne peace will protect them begins to falter. You wander through a marketplace on the eastern side of Knossos. The air smells of figs and ash. A group of sailors argues in a dialect you don't recognize. A merchant from the north offers bronze blades for sale, heavier, sharper than anything the local smiths make. A Minoan guard fingers one, uneasy. In the palace, the scribes try to maintain the illusion of control. The records of tribute and trade continue. The offerings flow to the shrines. But on the clay tablets, a new tone creeps in. Request for more metal, more guards, more strong men. The peace that once defined Minoan life is beginning to look like a liability. And then, as if to remind them that even gods can tremble, the island quakes again. This time, whole walls collapse. Columns splinter. Part of the palace roof caves in, crushing the storerooms beneath. The fires are put out, but the scars remain. Black streaks of soot that no plaster can cover. Across the sea, the Mycenaean kings are watching. They've seen the smoke. They've heard of the damage. They sense weakness. For centuries, Crete ruled the Aegean through trade and grace. But now, a harder world is coming. A world of swords and walls, of conquest and revenge. The Mycenaeans are not content to copy Knossos. They mean to replace it, and the earth itself seems to conspire with them. For even as the ground trembles under Crete, far to the north, the volcano of Thera begins to grumble, a warning deep and terrible from beneath the sea. The age of peace is ending, the age of fire is about to begin. The sea is strangely calm the morning the sky turns red. Sailors at Amnisos squint toward the horizon, where the line between water and air seems to waver. A thin grey haze drifts south from Thera, the northern island the Minoans once called a sister. No one worries at first. The Aegean is full of moods. But by noon, ash begins to fall. Fine, soft, silent. It coats the docks, the sails, the roofs of the palace. It settles on the lilies in the queen's garden, turning them grey. The priests rush to the courtyards, chanting to Poseidon, to the Earthshaker, to the great goddess who commands sea and sky. Bulls are sacrificed. Blood runs down the steps of the altars. Yet the ash continues to fall, thicker now, blotting out the sun. Far to the north, Thera, the island you now call Santorini, is dying. For months the volcano beneath it has been building pressure, the molten heart of the earth swelling beneath the sea. The first explosion tears the mountain apart. The sky turns black. Fire rains into the ocean. A sound like the breaking of the world echoes across the Aegean. Entire villages vanish beneath ash and rock. The sea boils, and then comes the wave. A wall of water, higher than any temple, roars outward in all directions. When it reaches Crete, hours later, it slams into the northern coast with a force beyond imagining. The ports of Knossos and Palacastro are erased in seconds. Ships are hurled into fields. Fish lie stranded in vineyards. Whole fleets are crushed against the cliffs, and the trade network that made Crete rich collapses in an afternoon. At Knossos, miles inland, the tsunami does not reach the palace, but its echo does. The ground shakes. Roofs crack. The storage jars explode like thunder. The light wells fill with dust. The frescoes peel from the walls. In the darkness, people scream prayers, their voices swallowed by the roar of the earth. When the shaking finally stops, Crete is silent. The air tastes of sulphur and death. For days the sun remains dim behind a veil of ash. The sea has receded, leaving ships stranded on dry land and fish rotting in the harbours. Crops fail. Livestock die. The gods, it seems, have abandoned the island. The Minoans rebuild. They always do. Their masons clear the rubble, repaint the frescoes, patch the walls. But something essential has broken. The confidence that once defined them, that serene belief in harmony and divine favour, is gone. You can see it in their art. The dolphins and dancers give way to darker scenes, shrines heavy with blood, figures kneeling in terror before the gods. The snake goddess, once radiant and life-giving, now appears with fierce, wide eyes. The smiles have vanished from Minoan faces. The eruption of Thera doesn't destroy Crete outright, but it wounds it deeply. Economically, spiritually, psychologically. The trade routes are shattered. The harbours buried in silt. The climate cools. Famine spreads. Without steady imports of tin and copper, the bronze workshops fall silent. The scribes record dwindling stocks of oil and grain, and somewhere, across the narrow seas, the Mycenaeans see their chance. They've always looked at Crete with envy, its palaces, its art, its gods. Now they see an island weakened by disaster, its navy broken, its people divided. The mainland kings begin to send traders and advisors, though everyone knows what they really are, agents of conquest. In Knossos, the queen listens as foreign tongues echo through her palace. The Mycenaean guests wear the same gold jewellery, drink the same wine and smile the same smiles, but there's steel in their voices. Their scribes bring new symbols, their soldiers new orders. Even the language of the clay tablet starts to change, as Linear A gives way to Linear B, and Crete's words begin to sound like Mycenae's. The Minoans, exhausted by the god's wrath, accept it. Better a mainland ally than another earthquake, they think. They invite the foreigners to share their courts, their temples, their power. But peace is a mirage now, and Knossos doesn't realise that it's no longer the master of its own destiny. In the courtyards, the bull-leaping continues, though the crowds are smaller. The music sounds thinner, the drums more hollow. Smoke from distant fires blurs the horizon. The people still pour wine to the sea, still pray to the goddess to forgive them. But when they raise their eyes, the sky looks empty. The volcano at Thera has reshaped more than the land. It has cracked the foundation of the Minoan spirit. The goddess who once blessed them has shown her fury. The sea that once protected them has turned traitor. And now, into that silence of faith, step the men of Mycenae, bringing with them the hard, heavy dawn of a new world. When the sea finally calms, Crete no longer feels like an island of gods. It feels like a survivor. The air is thick with dust that turns the sunrise red for years. Ash drifts into the cracks of houses, clings to vines, fills the cisterns. The once sparkling courtyards of Knossos are coated in grey, and the palace that once smelled of saffron and cedar now reeks faintly of sulphur and damp earth. The Minoans rebuild, because that is what humans always do after catastrophe. The artisans sweep away the ash and repaint the frescoes, though the new ones look different, heavier, darker. The graceful dolphins are replaced by scenes of ritual and fire. The women in the processions look less like dancers and more like mourners. Even the colours seem to have deepened. Reds turn to rust, blues to midnight. The island's priests declare that the goddess has tested them, and that the time of renewal has come. Offerings double. Bulls are sacrificed by the dozen. The altars overflow with blood and oil. Drums beat through the night to drown the trembling of the earth. Yet beneath the chanting you can sense fear, not the respectful awe of faith, but raw dread. Life goes on, but it is thinner now. The trade routes that once fed the island have withered. Egypt, still reeling from its own storms, sends fewer ships. The ports of the Levant are rebuilding. Tin from the distant west arrives rarely. Copper only in fragments. Without these, bronze grows scarce. The very metal that defines the age is slipping from their grasp. Knossos, still standing but wounded, becomes the last great light of the Minoan world. Around it, smaller cities lie abandoned, their people driven inland by famine or raiders. On the palace walls, cracks widen, patched and replastered again and again. The columns tilt slightly, their paint dulling under the ashen sky. The courtyards where bull lepers once vaulted now serve as storerooms for grain and jars of wine. And yet, the Minoans cling to dignity. They continue their festivals, though the feasts are smaller. They sing the same hymns, even when their voices tremble. They teach their children to dance in the courtyards, to carve spirals into clay, to pour libations to the sea, though some whisper that the goddess no longer listens. Among the survivors is a generation that has grown up in loss. They remember the earthquakes, the falling roofs, the dead hauled from the rubble. They look to the mainland with suspicion, sensing change but not understanding its shape. Then the Mycenaeans return, not as guests this time, but as rescuers. Their ships bring supplies, tools and weapons. Their scribes offer to help organize the stores of Knossos. They come wearing the manners of allies, but their eyes measure every wall, every storeroom, every weakness. The Minoan rulers, exhausted and desperate, welcome them. Mycenaean craftsmen are allowed to live within the palace, to set up their own quarters. Their language seeps into daily life. Their symbols, the spear, the chariot, the war helmet, appear alongside the labrys and the bull. Slowly, silently, the mainland begins to take root. In the workshops, bronze blades of Mycenaean design are forged beside Minoan daggers. In the archives, the scribes adopt Linear B, the language of conquest disguised as cooperation. What was once Cretan begins to sound more and more like Argive Greek. The palace still gleams in the sun, but the spirit inside it has changed. The dancers perform, but their movements are slower, more ceremonial than joyful. The priests conduct rituals that feel hollow, gestures to gods who no longer answer. And the people of Knossos begin to feel it, the weight of a civilization past its peak. The island's heart still beats, but faintly, irregularly, as if the goddess herself is fading with it. One night a storm rises from the north. Lightning flashes across the sea, illuminating the walls of the palace, the painted griffins glaring in the flicker. The waves crash against the shore, shaking the broken foundations of the ports. Somewhere in the palace, a guard hears distant thunder and mistakes it for drums, the old drums of festival. For a heartbeat he imagines the island is alive again, that the bull leapers will return at dawn, that the goddess still walks her courtyards. But when morning comes, the air is still and heavy. The sky is the colour of lead. The sea, once bright as bronze, looks dark as obsidian. Knossos stands, but it no longer rules. Its power has passed quietly to new hands, men from across the water who build with the same stone, worship at the same altars, but carry a harder will. The Minoan world has survived the fire, the ash, and the waves, but not the future. By the mid-14th century BCE, Knossos is no longer purely Minoan. The frescoes still shimmer, the columns still glow red in the sunlight, but behind the painted calm, something fundamental has changed. The voices echoing through the labyrinth are no longer soft Cretan tones, they're sharp, guttural northern. The Mycenaeans have arrived not as guests, but as rulers. They come quietly at first, men of the sword wearing smiles. The Minoan elite, weary from disasters and desperate for stability, let them in. The newcomers claim to serve the goddess, to protect her people. They build new storerooms, repair the earthquake cracks, and take charge of the harbours. They bring their own scribes who fill the palace archives with a new script, Linear B, a harder, more pragmatic cousin of the old Minoan writing. It records not hymns and offerings, but inventories, rations, weapons, men. Soon, the palace that once sang with colour and ceremony hums instead with bureaucracy and command. The Mycenaeans measure everything: grain, oil, bronze, even people. What was once a temple has become an office. The Minoans, ever graceful, adapt. They serve in the workshops, craft pottery for their new masters, paint frescoes to glorify new heroes. The snake goddess still appears in the art, but beside her now stand armoured men, chariots and spears. The balance has shifted. Male power rises where feminine divinity once reigned. You walk the upper halls at dusk. Torches flicker against the walls where griffins once prowled in eternal poise. In the Megaron the old throne still gleams, but the figure who sits upon it now wears a boar-tusk helmet. His accent is mainland Greek, his gaze cold and calculating. He calls himself Onax, the title of the warrior kings of Messene and Pylos. The priests bow to him, the scribes obey. Outside, the city endures, but differently. The once free harbours now fly the banners of Messene. The Minoan fleets serve under foreign captains. The artisans carve their labrices smaller, the spirals on their pots tighter, as if afraid of taking up too much space. The old joy in their work is gone. In its place is precision, beauty turned obedient. Yet the conquerors cannot entirely erase what they've inherited. They adopt Minoan symbols, even if they don't fully understand them. They build new shrines on old foundations. They copy the frescoes, the bull motifs, the flowing lines, but the rhythm is off. Where Minoan art danced, Messenian art marches. The mainlander's faith is transactional. Sacrifice for favour, not harmony for balance. Knossos remains powerful under Mycenaean rule. In fact, it becomes the administrative hub of the Aegean, controlling production and trade for a generation. But the spirit of the island is fading, diluted by foreign order. The goddess becomes a name on a ration list. Her snake-bearing priestesses are reduced to temple attendants. Still, not everyone accepts it quietly. In the countryside, the old clans whisper of rebellion. In the mountain shrines, women still light secret fires to the mother, leaving honey and poppy seeds as offerings. They pray for the return of the sea-born queen, for the day when Crete will belong to her children again. But the new rulers are efficient. They patrol the roads, guard the ports, and keep meticulous accounts of tribute. For a time, the island prospers under their watch. Mycenaean power stretches from Argos to Rhodes, and Knossos becomes their jewel. Then, as always, the earth remembers. A tremor shakes the palace late one summer evening. Oil lamps swing, cracks run up the walls. In the storerooms, amphorae topple, spilling grain across the floor. It's a small quake, not the destruction of Thera, but enough to frighten the priests. The memory of disaster still haunts the island. The mainlanders shrug it off. Crete shakes, they say. It always has. They do not know how the earth can betray you when you stop listening to it. Over the next years, more tremors come, some small, some not. Fires break out in the lower town. The archives fill with reports of shortages. Rebellions flare in the hinterlands. The empire they've built begins to strain under its own weight. And through it all, the last Minoans watch in silence. They've seen this pattern before: the pride, the blindness, the refusal to read the signs. The conquerors have inherited the throne, but also the curse. In the evenings, when the air smells of salt and dust, an old artisan walks the palace corridors, brushing dust from the frescoes his ancestors painted. He touches the image of a bull and murmurs, "We built this for joy." The torchlight flickers, and the painted creature seems to move, muscles alive for an instant as if remembering. The Mycenaeans rule Knossos now, but the soul of Crete, fluid, bright, elusive, still glides beneath the surface like a dolphin under dark water. And soon, even the new masters will learn. The goddess of this island never sleeps, and she never forgives those who forget where the power truly lies. The first quake comes before dawn, a low rumble that wakes the dogs and rattles the hanging lamps. In Knossos, the Mycenaean overseers rise from their beds, muttering that this island always trembles. They have grown used to it, an inconvenience, not an omen. But the Minoans still living under them know better. The old women whisper that the Earthshaker is stirring again, and that the goddess is not pleased with her new guests. By mid-morning, the tremors return. This time the earth rolls like the deck of a ship. Columns sway, jars shatter, and part of the eastern wing of the palace collapses with a sound like thunder. From the courtyards rise plumes of dust. The air fills with the smell of crushed plaster and spilled olive oil. You stand near the grand staircase, watching as cracks open along the red walls, running like veins through the paint. Workers and slaves shout, carrying water, trying to smother small fires that leap from overturned lamps. In the archives, clay tablets crash to the floor, breaking into shards. The bureaucratic heart of the Mycenaean system turned instantly to rubble. Outside, the city panics. The harbour at Amnisos floods as the sea heaves against the shore. The fishermen pull their boats inland, shouting prayers. In the temple courtyards, the priests rush to light incense and raise their hands to the sky. They beg the goddess to still the ground, to remember her people, but her answer is silence. When the shaking finally stops, Knossos is scarred but not destroyed. The Mycenaeans declare it a sign to rebuild, bigger, stronger, better. Orders are given for repairs. Slaves clear debris, masons replace columns, painters reapply the red and black pigments. The mainlanders work efficiently, but their repairs are crude, lacking the artistry of the old builders. The palace begins to look heavy, its elegance buried under practicality. The old Minoan masters, now labourers in their own halls, work in silence. They know the difference between rebuilding and restoring. You can't paint over a dying world and expect it to live again. For a few years, Knossos limps on. The new administration keeps the economy running, though less smoothly. Shipments of grain come from the mainland, but the island's own trade has withered. The harbour taxes are higher, the temples poorer. The scribes record shortfalls, losses, disappearances. It's the slow unravelling of a system pretending to survive. Then come the fires. No one knows exactly how they start. Some say lightning, some say rebellion. Others whisper sabotage. That the last Minoans, tired of servitude, set flame to the palace that had become their prison. All that is certain is that one night around 1375 BCE, Knossos burns. The blaze begins in the storage rooms where the jars of oil ignite like torches. Fire races along the corridors, devouring the wooden beams, feeding on the tapestries and the cedar doors. The labyrinth becomes a furnace. Heat cracks the plaster, melts bronze, turns the painted dolphins black. The palace's architecture, once its pride, becomes its death trap. The twisting corridors trap smoke and heat. The open stairways funnel the flames upward. Servants flee blindly, their sandals slipping on ash. The Mycenaean guards try to hold the gates, but the fire leaps faster than they can run. From the hills, the people of Crete see the glow, an unnatural dawn blazing over Knossos. Inside, the archives burn last. The heat bakes the clay tablets hard, sealing forever the records of this final day. Those same tablets will be found thousands of years later, still legible, still stamped with lists of oil, grain, and men. They will tell no stories of beauty or loss, only of administration interrupted by apocalypse. By morning, the great palace is gone. The columns collapse, the roof caves in, the storerooms are hollowed shells. The throne room, once the seat of the goddess, lies buried in soot. The griffins on the walls fade into grey ghosts. The scent of charred wood and oil lingers for weeks. The Mycenaean overseers are dead or fled. The surviving Minoans wander through the ruins in shock. Their home, their symbol, their heart has been erased. They bury their dead in shallow pits, wrap their idols in cloth, and carry them to the hills. Somewhere in the countryside, a priestess lights a small fire and pours oil into the ground. "We return you to the earth," she whispers. "You gave us life. Take us back." The smoke rises gently, thin, fragile, almost beautiful. After the fire, Knossos is never rebuilt. The survivors scatter across Crete, some joining small villages inland, others sailing east to Cyprus or the Levant. The once great island civilization dissolves into fragments, its memory fading into the sea. Centuries later, the Greeks will tell tales of King Minos, the Minotaur, and the Labyrinth, half-remembered echoes of this moment. They will speak of a queen's wrath, a hero's escape, a monster slain. But beneath those myths lies this truth, that an empire built on beauty and faith died not in battle, but in fire and silence. Knossos, the city without walls, finally met an enemy it could not charm. The flames have gone out, but Knossos still smokes. In the dawn light, the ruins glow faintly red, like coals buried in ash. The air smells of salt and soot and something older, the scent of endings. You walk among what's left, cracked jars, collapsed stairways, beams reduced to charcoal. The frescoes, once alive with colour, are scorched beyond recognition. The dolphins are gone, the lilies gone, the bull's eyes turn to black holes staring at nothing. This is how civilizations die, not in one single blow, but in the long silence that follows. The fire spared only what it could not consume, the clay tablets. In the ashes of the record rooms, the Linear B archives have been baked hard by the heat, their characters frozen mid-sentence. When archaeologists uncover them millennia later, they'll be astonished. "It's Greek," they'll say, "the earliest Greek," and they'll realise that by the time Knossos fell, the Mycenaeans had already taken full control. The last true Minoans were gone, but in the weeks after the fire there's no language left for such thoughts, only grief. The survivors move through the ruins like ghosts. The palace that was once the heart of the Aegean now lies cold and cracked, its labyrinth a tomb. No one rebuilds. The survivors know better. They gather what they can, tools, idols, food, and leave. Some travel south to the mountains, founding small settlements that cling to life in the valleys. Others take to the sea, seeking new homes on Rhodes, Cyprus, even as far as the coast of Canaan. The sea that once bound the Minoans to the world now scatters them. The goddess, too, leaves. Her temples stand empty. The snakes are gone from their altars, the horns of consecration toppled. Only wind moves through the ruins now, hissing softly through the doorways like her final breath. For a while, the mainland kings pretend they still rule Crete. They send ships, plant governors, collect tribute from the remaining towns. But without Knossos, the island's magic is gone. The power of the Aegean shifts north, to Mycenae, to Pylos, to Tiryns. Crete becomes a prize, not a heart. The people who remain on the island remember the old world in fragments, in lullabies, in festivals stripped of meaning, in patterns painted on new pottery. A spiral here, a double axe there. The goddess becomes a whisper, a name murmured before planting seed or lighting fire. The great myths of later Greece will borrow her image and make her mortal. Ariadne, the princess who loved Theseus and was left behind. In that story too, she dies at Knossos, not by sword but by abandonment, and yet the Minoans don't vanish completely. Their blood flows through the generations that follow, their art through the hands of others, their spirit through myth. The Labyrinth, born as sacred architecture, becomes a story of the mind. The search for order within confusion. The bull, once a symbol of fertility, becomes a monster, a warning against power turned inward. The sea, once their road, becomes a graveyard of memory. You climb the hill above the ruins and look down at what remains. The palace is a scar now, its symmetry broken, its heart exposed. From here, it looks less like a city and more like a fossil, the imprint of something that once lived, still beautiful in death. The people of Crete who pass by these ruins will not forget them. They'll tell their children stories to explain them, of gods who lived among men, of kings who demanded sacrifices, of heroes who escaped by cunning and string. Over centuries, the truth dissolves into legend, and legend becomes myth. Knossos, the beating heart of the Minoans, will live on not as history, but as story, and in that it will never truly die. The ashes of the palace mix with rain and seep into the soil. Olive trees grow again in the courtyards. Lizards scurry over the fallen stones. Time folds over the ruins like a calm sea covering a wreck. For the Minoans there is no final act, only transformation. Their art becomes Greek art. Their goddess becomes Greek divinity. Their fall becomes Greece's beginning. And when centuries later, a poet sings of King Minos, Theseus, and the Labyrinth, he's unknowingly singing of this place, of this day when the city of peace met its end in fire and was reborn in memory. Knossos is gone, but its shadow lingers across time. The labyrinth still breathes, the goddess still watches, the sea still remembers. The fire that consumed Knossos fades into legend almost as quickly as the smoke leaves the sky. By the turn of a single generation, the island that once ruled the Aegean has turned inward, fragmented into small hilltop communities surrounded by the quiet of olive groves and the hum of bees. The palaces of Phaistos, Zakros and Melia, once bright with life and frescoes, lie in ruin. What was once a network of light has become a landscape of echoes. You walk the road that leads away from Knossos, winding through dry valleys and narrow passes. The wind carries faint traces of the old world, bits of plaster in the dust, fragments of pottery that glitter like shells underfoot. Here and there you see the faint outline of frescoed walls in half-buried farmhouses, as if the past still tries to breathe beneath the soil. The survivors live simply now. Their houses are small, made of stone and thatch. The women grind barley by hand. The men fish and tend goats. No one writes anymore. The Linear B tablets, the last brittle records of Mycenaean control, have all turned to dust. The language of the old scribes has vanished. The bureaucrats who once counted jars of oil and grain are gone. The people no longer measure the world, they live in it. At night, in the hills, the elders tell stories. They speak of a time when the goddess walked among them, when the sea brought wealth instead of ruin. They tell the children how the gods punish pride, how fire and water swept away the great palace because men forgot who truly ruled the island. The stories are half prayer, half warning. The Mycenaeans still cling to parts of the island, but their grasp weakens. Their power too is beginning to crumble, undone by the same fragility that doomed Knossos, by earthquakes, by famine, by rebellion, by the weight of ambition. The great world that replaced the Minoans begins to tear apart, link by link. The palaces on the mainland will soon burn as Crete's did. The entire Bronze Age, stretching from Troy to Thebes, is unravelling. For Crete, it is both an ending and a liberation. Without palaces, without kings, the people return to something older, something purer. They become shepherds, farmers, sailors again. They worship in small shrines built among rocks and caves, not in towering temples. The goddess changes, but she does not disappear. She becomes Potnia, the lady of the wild, guardian of animals and harvests. Her face is simpler now, her rituals humbler, but she endures. You pass a village built on the slopes above the ruins. The people know the name Knossos, but it means little to them. Just the old place, a word for where the ancestors once lived. Children play among the stones, collecting broken bits of pottery to use as tokens in their games. They laugh as they run through doorways that once led to throne rooms. Their voices echo softly through the halls where priests once chanted to the goddess. The memory of empire fades, but the habits of beauty remain. Even in poverty, the Cretans paint. They decorate their jars with spirals, carve their amulets with symbols of bulls and flowers, They don't know that these shapes are thousands of years old. They don't know that they're preserving the soul of a vanished civilization. They simply find them beautiful, and in that small act they keep the old world alive. Seasons pass. The island grows quieter. The great trade ships that once filled its harbours no longer come. The sea has reclaimed what it once gave. The labyrinth sleeps beneath layers of dust. Centuries will pass before Crete stirs again, before new settlers and new gods arrive, before a poet on the Greek mainland imagines a hero named Theseus and a monster named Minotaur. He will make Knossos into a dream, the palace into a maze, the goddess into a monster, the king into a tyrant. It will all be wrong, and yet somehow it will all be true. Because myths are what remain when memory dies, and in myth, the Minoans will live forever. Their fall will become a symbol, not of failure, but of the cycle that defines all human history. The rise, the flourishing, the forgetting, the rebirth. From the hilltop you look back one last time. The ruins of Knossos shimmer in the heat, their stones the colour of honey. For a moment you can almost see it as it was, columns bright red against the sun, banners fluttering, dancers leaping over bulls, laughter echoing through courtyards. Then the vision fades, and only the whisper of the wind remains. Knossos is gone, but the rhythm it created, the balance of art and faith, beauty and order, beats quietly on in every age that comes after. Centuries pass and the ruins of Knossos sink deeper into the soil. The once golden walls crumble, the painted frescoes flake away, the labyrinth fills with dust. Farmers plough over courtyards where kings once walked. Goats graze among the fallen columns. The people of Crete forget the names of their ancestors, but the stories remain. And as those stories travel across generations, they begin to twist into something new. Myth. The Greeks who rise after the long dark centuries hear whispers about the island to the south, a place of wonder, power and mystery. They hear of a great king, Minos, who ruled not with armies but with ships. They hear of a palace so vast that those who entered could never find their way out again. They hear of a bull, sacred and terrible, that demanded blood. And in the retelling, memory becomes legend. King Minos becomes not a priest-king, but a tyrant, his justice harsh and absolute. His palace becomes a prison, the Labyrinth, built by the craftsman Daedalus, so cunningly designed that even its maker barely escaped. Inside that maze, the Greeks say, Minos hid his shame, a monster born of his queen and a divine bull, the Minotaur, half man, half beast. The Greeks turn the Minoan bull cult, once a celebration of strength and fertility, into a symbol of punishment and horror. The joyous dancers of the old frescoes become victims. Every year, says the legend, Minos demands tribute from Athens, 7 youths and 7 maidens sent into the maze to be devoured by the monster. It's not truth, but it's poetry, and through it, the memory of Crete survives. The Greeks remember Daedalus too, the engineer of Knossos. His wings of wax and feather echo the Minoans' mastery of art and invention. His son, Icarus, flies too close to the sun and falls into the sea, a perfect metaphor for the Minoans' own fate. They too soared high and fell hard. And Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, becomes the echo of the island's lost goddess. She is the priestess, the woman of the labyrinth, the one who knows the way through chaos. She gives Theseus, the Athenian hero, a thread, a lifeline through the maze, through darkness and confusion. She helps him slay the beast, break the curse, escape, and when he leaves her behind on the island of Naxos, she becomes something more, the mortal form of divinity, the sorrow of the goddess abandoned by men. The Greeks tell this as a story of heroism and triumph. Theseus slays the beast, Athens is free, the monster is dead. But what they never realize is that the monster, the maze, the king, the goddess, they're all fragments of the same lost world refracted through time. When they tell of Minos, they are remembering the Minoans. When they tell of the labyrinth, they are remembering Knossos. When they tell of Ariadne, they are remembering the snake goddess, the soul of Crete herself. Even the details linger in myth. The bull, the double axe, the dance, all there, transformed but unmistakable. The Greeks replace ritual with story, faith with drama, but the bones of the old religion still show through. You can almost imagine the first poet to spin these tales. Perhaps a sailor landing on Crete, seeing the ruined stones half buried in the hills, the walls that seem to fold back on themselves, the stairways that lead nowhere. He asks the locals what this place was, and they shrug. It was a palace, they say, a city of kings long ago. But the poet sees more. He sees mystery, tragedy, grandeur. He weaves a story to fill the silence, and that story spreads like fire. So the Minoans live again, not as themselves, but as gods, monsters, and heroes. Their civilization, erased from memory, becomes immortal through imagination. The Greeks may think they are inventing myths, but in truth, they are translating history. When later generations retell the tale, in Athens, in Rome, in Renaissance art, Knossos is reborn again and again. Each age remakes it in its own image. The Labyrinth becomes the symbol of the human mind, the Minotaur of the beast within, Ariadne's thread of the way out, all born from the ashes of a civilization that never wrote its own ending. Even now, as you stand among the ruins, the wind still hums softly through the stones. If you listen closely, it almost sounds like footsteps. The faint echo of dancers leaping through courtyards, of priests chanting, of children laughing before the fire. They are gone, yes, but their story has become the world story, and in that Knossos, the city of the Labyrinth, never truly fell. For more than 3,000 years the ruins of Knossos lie buried beneath layers of dust and silence. Seasons pass like waves. The olive trees grow wild over the courtyards, their roots winding through stairwells and cracked foundations. Shepherds graze their flocks where queens once bathed. To them, it's just a hill with strange stones, an ancient curiosity too old to name. The myths have swallowed the history whole. Then, in the dawn of the 20th century, a man with a notebook and a dream arrives on Crete. His name is Arthur Evans, and he has come to uncover the truth behind the legend. He's heard the whispers: Labyrinth, King Minos, Ariadne. He doesn't believe they're mere stories. He believes they're memories, distorted echoes of something real, and he is determined to find it. You stand beside him as he surveys the mound of Kephala Hill near modern Heraklion. The air smells of thyme and sea salt. The farmers call the place Knossos, after an old word from Homer's poems. Evans buys the land and begins to dig. His workers strike stone within days, then pottery, then walls. And then, one by one, the pieces begin to emerge. Red columns, staircases, light wells, frescoes of dolphins and bulls. The myth has a heartbeat again. As the excavation deepens, Evans realizes what he's found. A palace so vast and intricate that it could only be the labyrinth of legend. He christens the civilization Minoan after Minos, though that name never belonged to them. It's his gift and his mistake. He doesn't yet understand that he's reviving not a king's empire, but a people's memory. The deeper they dig, the stranger the discoveries. There are no fortifications, no weapons of war, no portraits of kings. Instead, there are altars, frescoes of women and animals, symbols of renewal and nature. It is a world built on beauty, not violence. Evans is astonished. The first civilization of Europe, he declares, and ruled by women. He reconstructs the palace in his imagination. Priests and priestesses walking sunlit corridors, bull leapers vaulting over sacred animals, dancers celebrating the cycles of the earth. He's right about much of it, but not all. In his eagerness, Evans rebuilds parts of Knossos, using concrete and paint to make his vision real. He repaints the columns red, sets up replicas of frescoes, restores staircases that may never have existed. He doesn't just uncover the past, he reimagines it. Critics will later call his work the invention of the Minoans. But even his mistakes carry truth, for the dream he creates is not far from the spirit of the people who once lived here. You walk through his reconstructed halls, sunlight spilling across plaster that smells faintly of lime. The columns taper downward just as they did 3,000 years ago. The frescoes, repainted but recognizable, show dolphins, lilies, and women with dark curls and calm eyes. For the first time since the fire, the palace feels alive again. Evans deciphers the tablets too, or at least begins the work. When Linear B is finally translated decades later, it reveals what the last phase of Knossos had become, a Mycenaean bureaucracy, not a Minoan utopia. The tablets list rations, slaves, taxes, weapons. It's a record of occupation, not glory. But beneath those cold inventories lies the ghost of something gentler, older, and far more mysterious. The archaeologists uncover thousands of objects. Jewellery shaped like bees, double axes, seal stones carved with gods and monsters. They find fragments of frescoes that show women standing before altars, serpents in their hands, their faces serene. They find the labyrinth, the double axe, etched everywhere on pillars, thresholds, and pottery. To Evans, it becomes a symbol of the Minoan spirit, a harmony between male and female, creation and destruction, life and death. In the newspapers, the world marvels. Europe, still staggering from war, is enchanted by the idea of a peaceful, artistic ancient people who worshipped beauty instead of power. The Minoans become a mirror for what the modern world wishes it could be, creative, graceful, unscarred by conquest. And yet, as more scholars come to study the ruins, a darker layer of truth emerges. They find evidence of sacrifices, of catastrophes, of political collapse. They realize that even here, in this paradise, humanity's old patterns, faith, fear, ambition, played out just the same. But that doesn't lessen the wonder. Standing on the steps of the restored palace, Evans writes in his journal, "It is as though the labyrinth itself has breathed again." He's right. After 3,000 years, Knossos has returned. Not as empire, but as revelation. And as you walk through its corridors, past columns and frescoes reborn, you can still hear faint echoes of the drums, the dancers, and the sea. The labyrinth has not lost its power. It never will. By the mid-20th century, the ruins of Knossos stand revealed to the world, a place half real, half dream. Tourists wander the courtyards that once smelled of saffron and olive oil, their cameras clicking where priestesses once walked. The sunlight glints off the red columns that Arthur Evans reconstructed, the ones critics call too modern, too smooth. But still, they draw people in. Everyone who visits Knossos feels it, the faint hum of something ancient still breathing beneath the stone. The more archaeologists uncover, the clearer the legacy becomes. The Minoans were not a forgotten branch of Greece. They were its foundation. Their architecture, their art, their religion, all flowed into what would become the classical world. The Greek word for labyrinth, labris, comes from their sacred double axe. The myths of Zeus's birth on Crete, of Europa carried across the sea by a bull, of Minos and his labyrinthine palace, all sprout from Minoan roots. Even their sense of balance, the way they married beauty and function, shaped the DNA of Greek civilization. The symmetry of Greek temples, the fluid movement of their sculptures, the reverence for pattern and proportion, it all begins here, on an island that built palaces like living organisms, with light wells and flowing corridors instead of rigid walls. The influence runs deeper still. The Aegean trade networks that the Minoans built never vanished. They simply changed hands. Their routes became the highways of the Mycenaeans, then of the Phoenicians, then of the Greeks themselves. Their art, spirals, waves, and natural forms, reappears in later pottery. Even the worship of a great goddess endures, re-emerging as Demeter, Artemis, and Aphrodite. Every Greek altar carries a faint echo of the Cretan Earth Mother. When you look at a Greek vase, you see Minoan curves. When you stand in the Parthenon, you feel Minoan symmetry. When you hear the myths of bulls and heroes, you are listening to the language of Crete retold by later ages. And perhaps that's the greatest triumph of Knossos, that even in ruin, it became the seed of everything that followed. Evans, in his later years, writes that the Minoans seemed strangely modern, and he's right. They were builders of plumbing and fresco, of colour and light, a people who could carve stone and move water with the same grace they painted lilies. They left no armies, no laws, no manifestos, only art. But art endures where armies don't. You walk through the hall of the double axes, sunlight flooding the space where the roof once opened to the sky. The air is warm, humming with cicadas. Somewhere below, tourists laugh softly. Somewhere far away, the sea breaks against the rocks. The sound feels familiar, as if the island itself remembers its rhythm. On the wall, the restored fresco of the bull lippers still dances, a young man vaulting over the bull's back, two women poised at either side. It's impossible not to see it as a metaphor for the Minoans themselves, caught forever in the instant between grace and danger, daring and destruction. They lived their entire civilization like a leap in mid-air, beautiful, risky, weightless, impossible to sustain. And yet, what a leap it was. Even after all the centuries, their art still moves you. It isn't static like so much of ancient art, it flows. The dolphins twist through blue waves, the lilies bend in invisible wind. It feels alive. It feels human. Maybe that's why the Minoans still matter. They remind us that the first civilizations of Europe weren't born from conquest, but from creativity. That empire can grow from joy as much as fear. That the truest measure of greatness isn't how long it lasts, but how deeply it continues to shape what comes next. As the sun sets over the hills of Crete, you stand at the palace's highest terrace and look down at the Aegean. The sea glows the same deep blue it did 35 centuries ago. Somewhere below, waves crash in the same rhythm as the drums once did. The labyrinth sleeps, but its heart still beats. The Minoans are gone, but their fingerprints are everywhere, on every myth, every marble column, every dream of paradise we still chase. Knossos may have fallen, but its spirit became the soul of Greece, and through Greece, the soul of us all. Night falls again over Crete. The palace of Knossos lies quiet beneath the stars, the same constellations that once shone on bull leapers and priestesses thousands of years ago. The wind drifts through the ruins like a voice, whispering in the language of time. The columns cast long shadows over the cracked flagstones, and the scent of olive and dust lingers in the warm air. You can almost imagine the torches relit, the drums beginning once more, the flicker of dancers' movements through the courtyards. But the sound is gone now, replaced by the hush of the present. Only memory speaks here. Standing in the moonlight, you realize that Knossos was never just a palace, never just a ruin. It was an idea, the first spark of something that would echo for millennia. The Minoans carved their faith into stone and colour, turning daily life into ritual, architecture into music. They lived close to the earth, to the sea, to beauty itself. And when disaster came, quake, ash, fire, conquest, they let the earth take them back without bitterness, leaving behind a gift instead of a grave. The legacy of Knossos isn't its ruins, it's the questions it still asks. How does a civilization thrive without war? How do people build beauty for its own sake? How do they live in harmony with the land, not in dominion over it? The Minoans answered those questions not with words, but with rhythm. In the curve of a vase, the grace of a fresco, the flow of light through an open stairwell, and when all else failed, when the waves swallowed their ports and the fire devoured their home, their art endured, their symbols slipped into myth, their spirit into memory. Even when forgotten, they shaped what came next. You close your eyes and listen. The night air hums faintly. Somewhere beyond the hills, the sea moves in slow, steady breaths. It has seen empires rise and fall, Mycenae, Athens, Rome, Byzantium. Yet still it sings the same lullaby it once sang to the Minoans. A civilization dies, but the sea never forgets. If you could walk these halls as they once were, bright with colour, full of music and laughter, you might feel what they felt. That time could not touch them. And maybe, in a way, they were right. Because even now, thousands of years later, they live on in every story we tell about the dawn of Europe, in every image of a labyrinth, every whisper of a goddess, every dream of a peaceful age. The Minoans built something the earth could not keep, but the imagination could. The goddess they worshipped, the mother of serpents and storms, has become a presence that even the centuries can't silence. Her face changes, Ariadne, Europa, Rhea, Aphrodite. But her essence remains the same: creation, endurance, renewal. And as the stars shift over Crete, you sense that she is still here, watching. The air itself seems to breathe with her memory, the soft exhale of a civilization that once danced with the sea. You take a deep breath and step out of the ruins. The path is uneven, but the night is calm. The sea below glows faintly under the moonlight, the same silver road that once led Minoan ships across the world. Perhaps that's how it always ends, not with destruction, but with transformation. The labyrinth never closes, it only changes shape. The ruins fade behind you, the cicadas fall silent, the wind slows, the world feels older, quieter, and, somehow, at peace. Knossos sleeps, Crete dreams, and history, ever patient, turns another page. Good night, traveller, from the island of light and labyrinths, where beauty was born and time first learned to dance. The night air over Crete feels softer now, heavy with the perfume of time and salt. You can almost see the moonlight ripple across the ancient courtyards, hear the sea whispering below like a long, slow breath. The ruins of Knossos are still warm from the day, and the stones remember everything. The voices, the laughter, the songs that once echoed through the labyrinth. You walk among them quietly. The past doesn't speak in words, it hums, low, steady, unbroken. It tells you that nothing is ever truly lost. The Minoans' temples may have fallen, their language may have faded, but their rhythm remains in every culture that followed, in every moment where beauty and humanity meet. The breeze carries a faint scent of olive oil and smoke, perhaps from a village below, perhaps from 3,000 years ago. You close your eyes and let the warmth of it wash over you. The world feels both ancient and alive, like time itself has curled back to rest beside you. The labyrinth has gone quiet, but its heart still beats. The goddess still watches, and the sea, eternal, patient, merciful, still carries their memory across the waves. Sleep well, traveller. The lights of Knossos will fade, but their glow lingers in you now, in every dream that hums with history, in every whisper of the sea that sounds like the pulse of the past. Good night, sweet dreams.